Without further ado, it'd be my honor to introduce our first keynote speaker, Stephen Bond. Stephen is a member of the Chickasaw Nation, began his work in horticulture as the production supervisor of the Sunshine Nursery, overseeing the management staff on resources near Clinton, Oklahoma. His academic background includes a double Bachelor's of Science in both biology and environmental chemistry from Southwestern Oklahoma State University, and has got a master's in environmental science through the Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering program at Oklahoma State University. After graduate school, he worked for the Chickasaw Nation as their ethnobotanist for 5 years, developing the Ecological Resources and Sustainability program that is still going today. From 2011 to present, Stephen has worked for the Intertribal Agricultural Council throughout the United States, and through a series of partnerships has assisted with advanced horticulture vegetable operations, both greenhouse and field production, and commodity crop farm planning, capital procurement, cow-calf livestock operations, farmer market development, vegetable cooperative development, value-added commercial ventures, such as milling, custom slaughter, marketing, shelf-stable vegetable products. He's got the Food Safety Modernization Act compliance and produce safety training, grant development. I'm not sure there's anything that he doesn't do. Stephen, thank you so much for being here with us. Everyone here in Kansas Rural Center, please help welcome Stephen for his keynote address this morning. Thank you. Stephen?
Excellent. Yeah, so most recently that the FSMA compliance I'd set up as a lead trainer to get the word out in Indian country, and through all those travels, I have which were all over the country. I did over 20 sites, really encountered a lot of different types of agriculture, and that's kind of been the theme of my life. This last 20 years has been kind of a blur. Leaving the Chickasaws, I traded one tribe for 530 plus. So with Intertribal Agricultural Council, and every tribe operates a little differently, and every state's a little different, and everybody's precipitation and soil types and perceptions of commercial, non-commercial. It's been a wild ride. Indian country's been really dynamic. There's been a lot of exciting inclusion initiatives through USDA, and that's working for Intertribal Agricultural Council, or IAC, I'll say from henceforth. That's been kind of the name of the game, is to help tribes get tied into USDA programming, and as we all know, agriculture is largely subsidized. In fact, we're coming to realize that it can't necessarily, in many cases, can't stand on its own without the subsidies. And it's becoming more of a public service, or maybe it's been that way for some time, as we transition into a larger urban population, even more so. And so the exposure across the country has been really fantastic. I spent some concurrent years working with in Arizona, Utah, and doing Eastern Oklahoma region. I'm doing Southern Plains now. I did Eastern Oklahoma for a little bit solely, as I found somebody to replace me in Western region. But yeah, Intertribal Agricultural Council, or IC, essentially serves as a liaison between the Office of Tribal Relations. That's had a significant highlight during the Obama administration. The Trump years were kind of bleak and black, but we're back into talking about programming for socially disadvantaged applicants. Another term that, or more modern term they use now, is historically underserved. And I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard a bit about that in the news. There's an initiative right now to do some loan forgiveness for historically underserved populations with FSA that's become controversial. There's been lots of disaster relief in the USDA circles. That seems to be what we're talking about right now, is disaster relief, whether it was for the pandemics, the cattle market shooting up and then falling out, like right before all this has happened. We've just had a lot of strife for agricultural producers across the country. And that's not been, that the disasters don't discriminate. Everybody's been kind of, if there's a lot of programs out there, and if you're utilizing the programs, you can skim by, but it's not been business as usual. So I prepared a real lighthearted presentation. Can I do a PowerPoint on here? Do you have me set up as speaker?
Yeah, I think you should be able to share the green share screen button at the bottom.
All right, so let me share my screen and see if we can pull this up. All right, so are y'all seeing the title for a PowerPoint? Excellent. All right, so it's a bit of an obscure name, but I really, after reading up and hearing about y'all's organization and kind of just trying to put together what I could best share, I thought I would it kind of fit under this title: Cultural Farming and Understanding Interconnections and Present Quandaries. I don't mean it to be lighthearted, I do mean it to be lighthearted, not obscure. But we have a lot of we're at a paradigm shift in agriculture, and we have a lot of technology. We've had some great successes, better living through chemistry. The last 50, 60 years have been pretty wild. And we've completely redefined the context of agriculture, which is a very ancient and sacred thing to many of our cultures. And we've not, like almost all of us on this call, it's not too many generations out of a tribal way of life for all humans. So I thought that this would be fun to jump in and let's see. All right, there we go. So defining community and culture, I think is as dynamic as defining agriculture in this modern context. We've got there's a lot more than I've put on this slide to consider. Whether we're private, public government, federal, state, local, corporate, individual, regional, state, county. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of a lot of people at the table. A lot of the decisions that any one of us make and influence all the other ones. And I'm often reminded of like the first humans that struck a light. If we were thinking about the law of thermodynamics, like what really set all this in motion. And the advancements in science, maybe striking two rocks together, the invention of the wheel, all of these things leading up to the first tractors and being able to plow up large tracts of land. There was the Dust Bowl. Everything we do has a consequence, and we're all interconnected. And so I just kind of put this slide on here. The way I do presentations is usually just kind of slides to kind of keep me focused, because I'm a tangential speaker. I'll get out there in the sticks real fast. But we have a lot of things that to talk about. Regenerative agriculture is the buzzword now. Organic production, a lot of what I'm seeing is we're trending to going back to simpler times, kind of taking a breath and stepping back, and trying to better understand what's going on in the soil. A lot of people talking about soils. A lot of the plant orientated folks and horticulturalists that I know We say, soil's important, but it's just the medium. It's really the plants that engineer, the microbe folks, and the vesticular arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi craze right now is the fungus that engineers the soil. Well, it's really a complete system, and so we have quite a complex natural system to look at, in addition to our societal operating conditions being very increasingly difficult to navigate. So that's something within Intertribal Agricultural Council we do. IC, we help folks access USDA programming. I've done a lot of introduction of technology across the country, irrigation, and I've got some slides on that. We help folks develop value-added shelf-stable products. We've got a value-added arm of IC that put people in touch with brokers, help put together contracts. We've historically done that out of the country because it's easier to get hooked up with a small restaurant chain in Italy than to work with like Sprouts, in the US, because we're so commercial and so large. But there's a lot going on. It's an exciting time to be an agricultural producer, whether you're a horticulturalist or a commodity crops person, or you're running cattle, and I intend to pick on everybody through this presentation a little bit. But most importantly, it's the peeps that keep us going. We got to be together. I know very few large-scale cattle operators that bring in all the calves themselves or do shots. You get the family out, you get your neighbors out. The same is true for us rowdy horticulturalists. Like when we're putting up a greenhouse or changing a plastic out, or potting up, or doing any kind of propagation, we look to our peeps, and the USDA is part of that peep. The rural centers part of the peeps. Like we got folks, we've got this wonderful conduit for communication and a great way to share knowledge. And so I thought that was a good slide. It's been better living through chemistry, as I said earlier, for the like since post World War II, we had the nitrification process. We've increasingly gotten larger tractors that can go faster, that are more precise. I mean, we're just a few years ago we were looking to precision agriculture to save the world, and to systematically adjust the flow of herbicide or fertilizer or pesticide as needed, and we've got I think this. Oh, there we go. But now we're kind of in a regenerative agriculture paradigm. That's the hip conversation. We're looking at the microbes. We're looking at soil solutions. I'm sure you guys have heard, take half, leave half. It's all. I kind of think that it's going to be a combination of things. We're not going to quit using herbicides, pesticides, fungicides anytime soon. We need the GMOs, we need the organic people. It's going to be kind of a mixture, but this is kind of what's really in our on our table right now. And there's not going to be a quiz over this cycle at the end of the talk, but I put this one up because it's more focused on the nitrogen versus the carbon cycle, which that's really important, is to hone those in. And it kind of was going to remind me of an idea. Like I hear of, I had a VAM fungi component in my graduate school work, where we were looking at bioretention cells and rain gardens is kind of a more modern term. But it was really looking at the significant impact of plants on soil and how they could change the retention, how they can act as a sieve. So we were trying to emulate a riparian plant environment to clean stormwater. And so this was at Oklahoma State. We had some field studies, and it was mostly an engineer-driven project. And I was invited to come on board to serve as a consultant on the plant selection. And so, we were, the engineers were mixing bioash, which is a byproduct of the coal-fired plants, and this bioash has an absorbent capacity. So if you imagine a kind of a soil or an ash molecule, but it's got a lot of holes and pores, and it's really reactive, and it can grab phosphorus, and it can grab nitrogen, and it can hold them really tight, and it does that until it doesn't, and becomes so it's a sink for contaminants, for heavy metals and things. But once it gets saturated, then it becomes a source. And cadmium was a big issue. And I said, hey, wait a minute, the plants are the real engineers here. All we need is sand, and we'll stick some plants in there, and do some very low nutrient soil. And so we started looking around, and we got some sandy loam, stuck some plants in there, ran a double randomized plot design, and watered these plants for a couple of years with the engineered soil solution. So this is applicable to agriculture in that we've got two types of pollution, non-profit non-point source and point source pollution. And so the bioretention is addressing the non-point source. So this type of research could be extended out, but most importantly, we were trying to harness nature's ability to naturally improve the soil conditions to have a better retention capacity for nitrogen, so it doesn't go straight into the lakes or the stormwater, carrying it out to the streams and rivers and so on. But so anyways, I've got a lot of background in VAM fungi because we ran a parallel study. And the irony is VAM fungi operate and are most notably found in low nutrient systems. And so, I'm all ears listening to the VAM fungi talk, but I know that most VAM fungi are going to be operating in extremely low nutrients situations, and that's where you have a significant colonization rate. And I remember my advanced soil chemistry classes, when you start talking about microbe interaction and humic acids and all the exudates, it becomes pretty voodoo. So we got a long ways to go to really dial in the microbial activity and how that's gonna save us. I think it's going to be a combination of things. I think. And so I imagine most of you guys are going to relate to this. I know my good Mennonite friends are always using this saying, keep it simple, stupid. And so maybe that means that we're going to go back to a less productive per acre approach, and we're going to utilize more microbes and get out of that better living through chemistry. Or we're going to have a combination of organic practices in our integrated pest management, some organic pesticides and herbicides and things when you need them. We're also trying to be aware of keeping the microbes going, but I won't get into that too terribly much. When I read Keep It Simple Stupid, it reminds me of a recipe book that I bought in undergrad that was highly influential, and it had a mini thesis in the front of the book talking about how if we just ate the grain, the world would be a better place. We don't need to feed it to livestock; they're really inefficient. And I remember, taking some biology classes and seeing the inefficiency of cattle, and I didn't put all this up there for y'all to read it. I tried to pick the most reputable source to throw some real numbers out there. And it's true, cattle are pretty inefficient, livestock are inefficient. Chicken's pretty efficient, but still, if we were to eat the grain instead of the cows, then we could take out 14.5% of the global anthropogenic CO2 that's going into our system right now. And for folks that are, following the climate change talk, that's significant. That's a significant reduction. I'm not saying we should do that. I love beef and all forms of meat. Really, I don't know that there's a critter that I haven't eaten that I didn't enjoy. But we're in this wild time, and this is one of the areas that we're going to be looking at. And we've got the lab meat. We've got the what is it, the better meat, or I forget what the heck that's even called. I've had it. It tastes, I don't know if that may be more telling of a fast food restaurant chain or what, but when you can eat the non-meat and it tastes just as good as the meat on a Whopper, maybe we need to address the quality of the meat Whopper. But there's a lot of solutions is kind of what I'm getting at here. And there's some more information. This is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. They've got some pretty radical ideas on how to tackle, and they've got a pulse on kind of a global perspective. And that's why I use them a lot in presentations, because we know what's going on here in the US. Well, we've got other countries that want to eat like Americans do. They want, China's is increasingly eating more beef. We're exporting a lot of beef to China. Historically, they've ate a lot of chicken and pork, which has a lower carbon footprint than beef. And so, in a lot of the environmental science talks, we talk about the carbon footprint, and if every person in the country had or in the world had the same footprint as an American, it wouldn't be a good place to live anymore. So back to the peeps, getting back into the fun stuff. So this is Holly and Bullet Ferris and our friend Chaz, and we were I partnered with these guys because they had a small scale cattle operation. They were doing grass finished beef. They were doing pasture raised poultry and in the tractors, and this is in western Oklahoma near Hinton, pretty harsh landscape, and so we decided to diversify. In the face of all these challenges, there's some canyon land back behind this these working pens, and that's where the poultry were, where we were getting flooded out every year down in the canyons. All the rain's coming at once. We started really looking at the Ferris Ranch and trying to figure out some of the things that we could do to kind of to do proof of concept. So when we're doing work out in other communities, we've actually done the work, so we're not talking about things we don't know. So one of the first things we did was we put up a propagation greenhouse, and I think I've got another photo of that here in a second. We also did subsurface irrigation. So we installed 8 acres of subsurface irrigation down in this canyon and started utilizing a fish emulsion fertilizer, and that was a good thing because it kept Bullet working on the ranch instead of chasing acreages and leases outside of the operation itself, which would have increased our overhead. So we did subsurface irrigation. I've got a picture of that here in a second. I've got Jake, the Bullet and Holly's boy, helping us put it in. But the idea is that we're going to have to, we're going to have to get clever. And I know a lot of us are diversifying, and doing, additional operations. Hemp was really huge. I don't know that was a profitable choice. I always recommended people to move along and do some other things, but vegetable production is up. The local food is hip. The utilizing some, having a corner of the cow-calf operation to be to grow some vegetables to plug into a cooperative, or even just to feed yourself to offset the growing expense of food is maybe one of those little solutions, because I think we're going to have a lot of solutions to stay competitive and to keep things going. We don't, we've been so largely dependent on subsidies in your commercial agricultural families that to lose those would be devastating, and we just have no idea what's going on. I know we just had a Secretary of Agriculture come on and say the system is broken. When Vilsack came back in, he addressed the fact that one of the some of the largest payments going out are for disaster relief, across the country, and we've got unstable cattle prices. We've got all sorts of pressures pulling internationally now that leaves a lot of uncertainty. So we do a lot of training with IEC. This is a community garden. Trying to get the kids ready for this type of for these types of changes. And so this was putting up something as simple as some raised beds right outside the science. So I don't know if y'all can see this twirling around. I think that there's in the bottom left, you can see that door going in. That's the science classroom. And so I spent quite a few months working with these kids. We talked about irrigation. We talked about soil. They actually helped. We had the local FFA kids help erect the raised beds. It's not in this picture, but we also have row cover that we would put in so they could get in a vegetable crop early in the season. And develop, get the root development with like a little greenhouse top. So it would work better with their classroom environment. We do a lot of cultural activities. So this is a native plant dye class. More peeps is kind of the theme. So this is just trying to get people and engage the culture of agriculture and keeping us tied into some of the historic aspects that have kept us all going. And it shouldn't all be work. You gotta play. But specialty crop production is one of the prevailing interests that I get from tribes and tribal communities. They want to grow vegetables. Vegetables are an easy way to plug healthy food right into their community, and many of these communities are historically cattle, livestock, sheep for Navajo and New Mexico, cows, and across the Southern Plains into the Great Plains, Oklahoma, Western Oklahoma. It's principally cattle. Eastern Oklahoma, it's largely dominated by cattle, and we have very few multi-generational vegetable folks. So we talk a lot about specialty crop production, and in Indian country, it gets really complex because the diet is different in some of these communities, moreover, there's an interest in eating ancestral foods, so like the corn, beans, and squash, of course, we all know, but some wild harvested things. Berries are really important. The fruit and tubers and things that are harvested, they've not made up a significant portion of our diet for some time, but there's a great interest to bring it back. And so so I've kind of put a little more spin on the specialty crop. Well, essentially, USDA will acknowledge anything grown as long as it's managed. And so if you go out and water some blackberry bramble, and then you're harvesting those blackberries to sell at the farmer's market, that's going to be inclusive in that definition of specialty crop, which is really important. And USDA has put out some exciting list and nutritional, address the nutritional component of some wild harvested food for the FDIPR program, the federal feeding program for American Indian tribes. It's synonymous with SNAP, or the food stamps program, except for you get the boxed food, the commodity cheese, the canned beef, if you guys are familiar with that. Well, they've been including a lot of native wild harvested foods as pilot scale projects across the US. Buffalo was a big one. The blue corn mill was another one. And there's been some hiccups along the way. Blue corn mill in a coarse grind, if y'all have ever grind your own corn, or if y'all still make hominy and things back home, it's fundamentally different than the corn meal we buy at the store, or corn flour we buy at the store, and so we're in this kind of it's a like paradigm shift. We're learning a bunch about things that we forgot in some cases, but wild harvested vegetable production. We do a lot of community garden work. We're trying to educate the youth. When I'm on a site, I don't hold anything back with the youth. We're talking about some simple irrigation systems, which are invaluable for growing vegetables. Okay, so now we're going to kind of transition into a bit of a snapshot of a presentation that I would typically give in Indian country. We talk about USDA program access, of course, is site specific. It's hard to get beginning farmers and ranchers tied into USDA. USDA really works for folks that are established farmers and ranchers. They've got 3 years history. They know what a Schedule F is, and they filed it 3 years in a row. That really helps you get into the USDA programs. There's a lot of great USDA programs for beginning farmers. The microloan program is something that we use regularly. NRCS has got a lot of latitude, and they do some exciting things in the states that we work with. We work across the country. So we see some states are better than others at exercising that latitude. But we're dealing with site specific issues across the state, and it gets really radical. I worked at or helped put together an operation in near Buffalo, New York, with the Seneca Nation. They get a lot of snow, and they don't have a very long growing season, and so that's vastly different from Oklahoma or even Kansas, where we've got a pretty long growing season, and we don't get 10 feet of snow, and they have that lake effect out there right off the lake. The Great Lakes, they just get a lot of snow out there, and the soil's hard to work in the spring. So you got to do a lot of your, quite a bit more setup in the fall. It's vastly different from working in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah. During there was a round of CARES Act funding that come out that was intended to help the tribes develop infrastructure to address issues with the coronavirus. Some of the tribes used that funding to develop some agriculture and to increase their food security. Well, one of them was at the border of Idaho and Nevada, and it was a 4-hour schlep for any kind of diesel or propane to haul out there. They didn't have the right electrical to put up a large scale commercial greenhouse operation. They've got water, but there was other concerns. There's not a like wholesale greenhouse folks out in that neck of the woods. So things are very regional, in addition to site specific. And the think tanks are regional too. If you're going to be doing subsurface irrigation and you want somebody to install it for you, that's coming out of California or Arizona. I know that folks are flirting with subsurface for corn and wheat production in Kansas. but they're still not those services are site specific and regional too. So we do a lot of work with our beginning farmers and ranchers on small scale production, micro farm, the type of operation where you make $100,000 on an acre or two. If y'all weren't aware of that capacity. So that's hard to pull off. It works better if you've got a French accent and you've written the book, The Market Gardener. Jean-Martin Frontier's one of those highly successful market farmers. The Never Sink Farm operation, I forget that gentleman's name. They do some amazing stuff. So we try to plug people into things that are already working for other folks and try to be regional about it. I just put a couple of links on here. Buckeye Tractor Company. They've taken it back to the 40s, 50s. If you're looking for that old iron to pull through the soil to do specialty crop production, that's a great link for that. What's pictured in this photo is a 853 Lamborghini diesel powered 2-wheel tractor. And that's taken it back to the beginning of tractors. And so these things have 12, I think they're 8 or 12 horsepower. We can do potato plows with them. This is just a tiller setup. I've got a power harrow. It's a way that I can get a lot of technology into a community for around $12,000. If you get, and they're very versatile. So this isn't just a big rotor tiller. This unit, let's go back. This unit can turn into a classic tractor. We've been playing around with 4-wheel tractors, but this is really important for the communities because a lot of things are hand done, hand planted. A lot of the tribal operations. Now we're talking about community level, not the tribe or. So when you talk about tribal operations, you may have some grassroots within a tribe that are still hand planting, but if you look at the tribes in Arizona, they've got some of the largest commercial commodity crop operations in the country. They've got several 100,000 acres of irrigated farmland and are some of the largest clients of the USDA in the state. And so it's really across the board. But these little tractors I can take into communities and introduce folks, train them on using double disking techniques to raise beds so you don't get flooded, to protect your seed. There's a whole pile of stuff in the back of the truck here. There's a precision seeder in here where we can singulate at 1.5 inches. We can put down mustard seed, if you guys are familiar with how small mustard seed at 1.5 inches, and we can do 4 or 5 rows of them to grow some of the Asian greens, which are really productive to get food into the community. So that's kind of the plan, and to teach people how to grow food. You don't have to have the specialized equipment, but it's something that we've helped a lot of other organizations with. And it's something that I can get somebody a microloan, get them set up, and they can grow all their own food and produce for 10 or 20 families in their community. Here's the BCS again. Here's another shot. So in the left, we're setting the beds. So that's Montserrat. She was an intern from Mexico City and a grad student at OSU that was working with Pawnee Nation, which is now called Pawnee Seed Collective, I think. They've been bringing back and working with the genetics of their ancestral corn for 20 years in Nebraska. And so they work with the Lincoln, Nebraska on some of the real sciencey genetics stuff. On the right-hand side, we can see the BCS is set up with the double wheel. We probably just planted potatoes and we're pulling soil over the potatoes, or maybe we're setting beds with that double disc. And you can see, just like any other tractor, you got to put a lot of weight on the toolbar, and these things drive themselves. So this is a wonderful tool that we use. I picked up this Beaver Sato, which predates the Mitsubishi tractors. This is a tiny little guy. I can load it on the back of my trailer and out of my own pocket afford to drive it around to the communities. And this is our plasticulture setup. We set up an acre of plasticulture, and it worked really great. This is down at the ranch. So this is some of my stuff that I've done with friends and family that we share out out across the U.S. Here's a photo of Bird Creek Farm, which has changed their name, and I forget the name, but Osage Nation. A lot of tribes are putting in. They're listening to their community, and the community, kind of to tie it back into the community talk. The community want vegetables, they want healthy food options, and they expect the government to make that happen. We don't have those second generation farmers or vegetable farmers. We live in food deserts. Not just when I say we, I don't just mean us natives. I mean all of us rural people. We live in food deserts. If we want healthy produce, we got to grow it. Y'all all know that a tomato from the garden tastes better than the green stuff they ship out of California or Florida. And so there's a big drive for the tribes to do vegetable production. This is up in South Dakota. We installed an acre of beds and did a really advanced drip irrigation system for them, and help them get some grants to do it. So this is me tying in some irrigation line. This is back at my place in Stratford. You can see these the double drip systems are something that we use regularly, and you stagger the drip emitters. So for those of y'all that aren't familiar with drip irrigation, it's a way to precisely put down water around the rhizosphere. So you're not watering the plant, you're watering the mounds in this area, and we can inject fertilizer very, very systematically through a Venturi pump. It's really simple. You just tie in a vacuum system and it pulls fluid out of your concentrate fluid solution right to the plant. You can do it organic, non-organic. And so we teach a lot of people about drip irrigation. It's a way to reduce your pest, increase your yield, and with the lowest water use. So that's really, really a big one, and a technology that's not going away. This is something that's going to carry us into the future. So here's if we see that PVC coming out of the ground by the little box, that's where you clip in your Venturi. You can automate that with the solenoid valve, and reduce the labor associated with the operation and increase your efficiency. And so we talk a lot about irrigation technology. I put this up for fun. Irrigation tech isn't foreign to Native communities, and I imagine a lot of y'all utilize irrigation in Kansas, and I've seen a lot of modifications to the old center pivots where we're doing micro now. NRCS is one of those community members that's driving the conservation. But here in the country, we've had some really good examples of civilizations that relied on irrigation too, that still succumb to drought and salting of the soil. We think about California as the biggest vegetable operations now, in Florida. But before California was California, Oklahoma was a huge vegetable purveyor. Before Oklahoma, Ohio was a huge vegetable purveyor. After Oklahoma, we went to South Texas and used that irrigated land and salted the earth. We had the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. Ohio, I'm not really sure what happened there. They just went to commodity crop production. But this isn't our first round of production that is or isn't working. If y'all are following what's going on with California right now, they're shutting off multi-million-dollar orchards. The state is looking at the inefficient water use of the farmers and shutting them down off of well production. The droughts have left their irrigation canals dry. Like we've got some crazy stuff going on right now. I was just out in Hemet a few years back and saw massive almond groves and citrus operations they just turned the water off and everything died. That's pretty shocking. Well, the same thing happened outside of Phoenix and Maricopa County. You had hundreds of thousands of acres where you had city encroachment. It was a different causation, but city encroachment got into that ag land. We've got, what is it? Bonner Springs, Kansas. That's some gorgeous agricultural ground. And I saw a massive shopping mall and sports center built right over some of the most productive soil right there. And that was a few years back when they were doing all the sod busting. I mean, things are crazy. But that's, but we definitely are grounded in a history of agriculture, all of us. And we've had to come up with some pretty clever ideas. This is Hopi, out probably near Kokosmovie, Old Robbie. I've got some other photos of Hopi. This is a spring, and they use a little dripper and put water in a pail and go out and water the plants. I don't think it's going to come back to that. It could, but it's just I put this slide up because we're grounded in a history of agriculture. Agriculture is culture for us. It's what we do. It's the foundational thing in all of our lives. We had the pictures of the dye plants. We had in World War II, when our chemical dyes fell through because we were cut off, we started using Bodart to dye our parachutes so the Allied forces could differentiate themselves from one another. So all of this, all of agriculture is the foundation of society. But okay, back to irrigation. So more of kind of our like a typical presentation I give. We talk about site specific, the different types of agriculture. We talked about water detention and how there's a lot of novel ways to do that. This is if I'm not mistaken, in Peru, and they use they've got really good snowfall, but all that snowfall goes off those high elevation mountains real fast. And so they shoot water up in the air and allow it to freeze back down. And they use this as a water detention technique. So they can run this water off over a longer period of time to water their potatoes and their traditional crops up north. Let's see. Oh, we're clicking. The Appalachian folks and a lot of the people with springs are familiar with this technique. This is very common out in the Southwest and the Western. Zach, how are we doing on time? Are we good? Okay, brilliant. So I worked with a Tohono O'odham producer on the Mexico border outside of Sells, Arizona, and it was an awesome destination. Like especially for an Okie coming back from 60 inches of rain a year. To be out in the middle of desert thinking that we're doing alfalfa production, I was going, what in the heck? But there were Gila monsters and somebody had just taken his tractor and drove it like 30 miles to the desert because it was just out in the middle of nowhere, so he had to recover it. And this farmer was in a bad way. He was spending $800 an acre to grow $300 an acre alfalfa. Because he was having to have his diesel trucked in to run that heavy old time pump that he got put in by NRCS. So he got an equip to drop a well. He was the first Tohono O'odham individual to receive USDA funding. And I worked with several tribal operators that were the first to receive a cattle loan or anything from USDA. I worked with Terrence Otah and Hopi. He got a cattle loan to buy 12 cows, and he needed a horse to work them. They wouldn't loan him money for the horse, so he couldn't work the cows. So he didn't have calves. So anyways, there's all kinds of stories, but this one story in particular, it wasn't profitable to spend $800 on $300 an acre alfalfa. You know, their yields are quite a bit lower out there. So we brought in rural development. We looked at a REAP, a Rural Energy Incentive Program, and we tied that with EQIP. We put in some dirt ponds, is kind of what they call this, or a detention pond, a little bit uphill. It's relatively flat out there, but we got the elevation up, and we used the diesel to start the pump. The solar picked up there and pumped the water into the detention pond, and then we flood irrigated the alfalfa. And so we're going to come up with solutions in the most extreme environments. As Matt Damon said, we'll science the hell out of it. So these are some of the examples that we've worked on. I don't know where this is, but I just thought it was a great photo. Detention bladders, why not? These are really groovy. This kind of falls back into that low impact development, but it could also be used to detain water. So these are like an egg crate design where you stack this up. You got your water under the ground, so your water detention isn't taken away from maybe a micro farm that doesn't have much square footage. So delivery. All right, so irrigation sprinkler heads are not terribly old. If you've ever looked at the history of the high impact sprinklers and center pivots and things like that, that's a relatively new technology. I have a picture of Montezuma's Castle, but I can't find it. But this is the little stream outside of Montezuma's Castle for those of you that have visited Cottonwood, Arizona. I was just so moved by all the irrigation in the West. So I think this is in Utah. We've got these water wheels in Oklahoma and Kansas too, but they're a hallmark feature of the Utah landscape, and in some parts of Colorado, really the Four Corners area. We're used to seeing this out watering the corn and sunflowers or whatever, wheat. Here's an impact sprinkler. This is probably somewhere in South America. And then this is an interesting approach and something that I regularly tell farmers. If you're trying to access irrigation assistance through NRCS and you need some EQIP dollars, well, you got to have 2 out of the last 5 irrigation records. So grab one of these things, stick it out there, get your irrigation record for 2 out of the 5, and then they'll help you with something more sustainable. It's kind of a goofy workaround, but just like the feds, like we got to be in a bad way before we get any help. We can't, so maybe we need some policy change. So I don't know if y'all are getting the theme of this talk. It's like, there's going to be a lot of solutions. We've got, we got a lot of people involved. We got to have policy change. So this was to cue me to talk about that 2 out of the last 5. Like, why don't we just help people install a subsurface drip irrigation system in the first place, and then they could be more efficient? I've done some, I helped a friend in Durango. He was on a horse farm, and it was the first time I was introduced to this style of irrigation, but they pump. I was just out there on a trip, and you pump water out of the Animas based on ancient Spanish water rights, and people have bought these lands, and they've got a lot of show horses or riding horses, and they grow a lot of grass and alfalfa, and they use this type of irrigation system. But I got to haul these heavy, ridiculous tubes around, and you put them uphill and you let the water run out downhill, and you can slide those little gates down to increase or decrease the water. It was crazy, but there's all different styles. So here's your basic drip irrigation system, and this is principally what I work with when we're in communities. You've got a very low PSI on each of those emitters. Of course, they all add up, but you can operate on 12 to 14 PSI and get water delivered over an acre. You're going to need 30, 40 PSI, and the bigger you go. But this is a great overview. You got a pressure tank, sand filter, imperative for drip irrigation. This hydrocyclone is a way to, and venturi and bypass valves are a way to direct nutrient flow. You know, and the nutrients build up, so you got to flush it every year. There's some management, some maintenance on it, but it's a great solution to getting irrigation out to vegetables, and so this is more emblematic of the systems that we designed. So I utilize the solenoid valves and do zones, so we can do crop rotation and alter the flow rate or length of water distribution. So if you're running at 0.66 gallons per minute, you know, you're going to run some areas for 30 minutes, some other areas maybe for an hour. You may be running it every other day or every day, depending on the season. And you've got different crop nutrient requirements. So like your typical numbers are like 60 cubic acres to get a vegetable crop. And I forget, you can generically apply nitrogen and phosphorus kind of ubiquitously across your crop field. But it's better if you can do a targeted application of nutrients and micronutrients. You know, for instance, if the difference between growing corn and strawberries, you know, oh my God, if you can really dial it in and use the science. But we do a lot of these systems, and I've been working with USDA on a few different projects on, they kind of want to irrigate everything all at once, one big engineered solution. This isn't that much more complicated, but we're trying to get some standards into USDA. The WCCAT, the Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Authority, I know I'm messing up their name. They've done it's a group of retired NRCS folks, and they've done some really exciting things to get some traditional ecological knowledge or traditional practices put into NRCS EQIP programs, which is pretty groovy. And so I'm trying to follow the same line and kind of get a couple of these as we've got a few of them as proving ground, so we can get it into the standards. But there's a lot of solutions. Technology's really growing. We can utilize sensors throughout the soils. You know, a lot of the corn production up in y'all's neck of the woods, and wheat production is already using some of the subsurface, and they've got sensors all throughout the field, so they can change these zones to water this area more than that area, or to let us know where we need to do fertilizers. And we're kind of in that paradigm shift. It's not what the folks did, but what they do in the face of change. So this is Jake, and Jake is having a radically different experience than Bullet. Bullet hand weeded, you know, the wheat fields and corn fields, and drove the same tractors that his great grandfather drove, and did things the same way his great grandfather did it. But we got an upcoming generation, and this is a subsurface injector where we pulled that subsurface line. If anybody wants to know more about any of this stuff, shoot me an email. I think I got my email on the last slide. We should be coming really close. We're not the only ones that are facing these challenges. Israel has done some really provocative stuff with terraforming, where they're working with like nothing. I mean, they got desalinization plants. They're inching out into a desert landscape, and they're growing food for their country and focusing on food modernization, you know, the food security. There's several international organizations that have been kind of working in the fringe of this subsistence production in Africa and South America. When you get outside of the US bubble and start looking at these other practices, it gets pretty exciting, and those are part of that solution. It's not going to just be better living through chemistry anymore. Those massive harvesters that run 30 miles an hour neck to neck and just shoot the grain into the semis, that may always be the case, but it may not. You know, there's other ways of doing things, and really mixing it up and looking at community level production, even if it is subsistence for some of our population, could be part of an overall solution. So this is Hopi Mike, Mike Kitawa, he built a Hopi dwelling, has got his punky bread oven. I visited his place, it's gorgeous. I was out there during a blue moon. Oh my God, it was quite an experience outside of Mikos. No, he's outside of Kikosmovi, but it's right down from Old Arabi, a village that was founded sometime before the year 1100 AD. And this picture is from the Bureau of Ethnography in the early 1900s of Hopi growing corn. So they use a stick to push the seed down to the water. They catch the snowbank off of these mesas and buttes, and kind of channel that water into these big holding areas. And then they take that stick, and if you got to push that corn down 3 foot, you push the corn down 3 foot. I don't understand how it works, but it's a stick, and they put like 5 and 7 seed, and you can see the distance between the corn. Well, I put this on because we probably all know corn real well, and just as a commonality. But they grow this corn. It only gets about 3 foot tall, and it puts out great yield. And I worked with Mike was wrapping up his PhD, and Keisha Tatum, I think, was the NRCS state conservationist for Arizona, and a regional guy, I forget his name, but he's such a cool guy, in Flagstaff. We were trying to get Hopi dryland farming included in equip practices so they could deal with erosion. And so a pretty cool project came out of this, where we're able to get Hopi in what they call dryland farming. Well, this isn't dryland, this is irrigation. It's just a whole nother perspective. And so we really got to kind of open up our eyes and our perspectives, and look to other cultures, and to influence whatever it is that we're going to design as Americans to move forward through all this change and ambiguity. But hopefully that was long enough to fulfill my talking obligation. and a pleasure.
That was great, Stephen, and I'd like for you to keep going another hour. Unfortunately, we got some other speakers ready to go here soon, but we do have some a time for a question or two.
Yeah, we've got about 5
that'd be
minutes.
okay? Yeah.
Well, this is a mini Jersey that had attacked the side-by-side and ended up drinking my beer. So I got a picture of it. We've been feeding them brewer's yeast, and they were just cuckoo over that brewer's yeast. So if you ever park the side-by-side, they'd swarm you.
Oh, does it affect the milk taste at all? Is that a new
yeah,
is that a new beer in the making?
It could be, yeah, a milk stout indeed. And but no, this was out at Bullitt and Holly's place, and they had mini Jerseys as a way to, they were trying to diversify. We did the grass finished beef, that brought in some dough. They had the chicken tractors. That was a lot of work. Oh my God. They tried turkeys. They've got, they've started a small herd of Jersey, just to diversify their operation. And so that was one of the things. But yeah, I'm open to any questions about anything. And here's my email too. So indianag.org. I've got a lot of ready-made stuff on irrigation I can help folks with if they're interested, or needing a hand, or to point them to some design element, or we can talk USDA all day. We've done millions of dollars in funding opportunities for folks across the country, but specialty crops is really my forte. It's where I prefer to exist.